The night rain in Manhattan fell like ribbons of silver, coating the slick streets with the light of loneliness. Natalie Brooks pulled her coat collar higher, her worn-out shoes soaked through, the plastic bag in her hand trembling with every gust of wind. She had just left the Whitmore Financial Tower where she worked as a night janitor. The building rose so high its top floors seemed to touch the clouds, while she, down below, stooped to scrub restroom floors. She was used to getting home at 2 a.m, used to the distant car horns and the flashing neon lights reflecting in puddles. But tonight, the rain made the road feel longer, heavier, as if every step dragged behind it a past she didn't want to remember. Inside the plastic bag was a discounted loaf of bread, a cheap bottle of medicine, and a small vial of pills for Megan, her younger sister. That was all Natalie could afford on $13 an hour after 6 hours of scrubbing floors. Her life was a series of cold calculations. Save $4 on the bus, walk home, stretch the medicine for 2 more days. Every penny was a survival strategy. She cut through an alleyway between 2 old warehouses. Normally, it was quiet, only the sound of cats or a rolling soda can. But tonight, a voice echoed low, hoarse, and reeking of alcohol. Brooks. Natalie Brooks. She froze. Her breath caught in her throat. That voice belonged to Victor, the man who had come to collect debts after her husband's death. 3 men stood under a flickering streetlight. One of them, tall and tattooed, smirked. "You've been hiding from us for too long. 6 months. The boss misses you." Natalie stepped back. "I told you, I'm working. I'll pay. No one cares you're working. He wants money, or something else." Victor's gaze dropped to her thin legs, his eyes slicing like knives. "You've got a little sister. Right, cute, sick, poor thing. If you can't pay, we can trade." Natalie's whole body went rigid. The rain blended with the tears she didn't realize had fallen. She turned to run, but a rough hand clamped down on her arm, squeezing hard enough to stop the blood. "That's enough. Victor." The voice was deep, cold, and final. It came from the darkness at the end of the street, where a black SUV had stopped its headlights cutting through the rain like lightning. A man stepped out, under the downpour. He wore a charcoal gray coat, broad shoulders, tall frame. His steps were heavy, measured, each one weighted with authority. No one spoke. His silence alone made the others step back on instinct. Natalie couldn't see his face clearly, only his eyes deep and cold as steel. "Let her go," he said. Victor snorted, trying to sound tough. "Not your business, pal. She owes money. She doesn't owe you anymore." The man's words came slow, deliberate, as if each one were carved into wet concrete. "She belongs to me." Both Victor and Natalie froze. The man stepped closer, rain cascading down his shoulders as if it dared not touch him. A thin scar ran from his chin to his neck, and in the glimmer of light, his face appeared chiseled, the face of someone who had seen too much blood and darkness. "Lorenzo Whitmore," he said, his gravelly voice resonating deep in her chest. "If there's a problem, come find me. But if you ever touch her again, I'll bury all of you under this river." Victor swallowed hard, recognizing the name Whitmore, a family that once controlled half of Manhattan's underworld. "Heard you were dead," Victor muttered. Lorenzo raised an eyebrow. "The dead don't usually stand in front of you." The 3 men vanished as quickly as they appeared. Only Natalie remained, trembling in the rain, her bag spilled open on the ground. She bent down, gathering what she could, the crushed bread, the soaked pills, her hands shaking from the cold. "Don't," Lorenzo said, stepping closer. He crouched beside her, his scarred hands the hands of a man who'd killed, now gentle, almost fragile, as they gathered her things. "Let me take you home." "No." Her voice cracked but held its fragile dignity. "I can walk. In this rain, in the middle of the night with shoes falling apart." He glanced at her feet, his eyes softening with something unspoken. "You used to walk brighter streets than these, I remember." Natalie froze. "You know me?" He didn't answer. He simply opened the car door. "Get in, Natalie, before I change my mind." The SUV rolled through the empty streets. The glass towers reflected their own light across his face, cold, proud. But behind it lingered something else, something old and sorrowful. "Who are you really?" she asked, clutching the bag in her lap. A man who owed you a promise, he said, eyes fixed on the rain ahead. And tonight, I paid a small part of it. Natalie frowned. I don't remember ever meeting you. Lorenzo's smile was faint, warm, and dangerous at once. You once saved a boy, 10 years ago, in an old Brooklyn building. You hid him in a basement for 3 days, fed him stale cookies and rainwater. You thought he died, but he didn't. He lived. And tonight, he found you. Natalie's heart skipped. Her breath caught in her chest. The memories broke loose: a burning building, the screams, the boy with dark brown eyes she once hid in the shadows. No, it can't be, she whispered. That boy's name was Lorenzo Whitmore. His voice was soft as the wind. And you, Natalie Brooks, are the only person who ever made me believe there's still light in this world. The car stopped in front of her old apartment building. The rain hadn't eased. He leaned over, opened the door, and handed her a black umbrella. Take it. Out there. Too many things are waiting to tear someone like you apart. She hesitated, then took it. Why help me? Lorenzo. Because of a debt. Or out of pity. He looked at her for a long moment, then spoke quietly, because of a promise I made when my hands were still covered in blood. One day, I'll come back, and no one will ever hurt you again. The car door shut. The red taillights faded into the curtain of rain. Natalie stood there, umbrella in hand, heart pounding wildly. Everything blurred in the downpour. But in that moment, she felt the past had never truly left. It had only waited for a night like this to return, carrying its secrets and shadows. And she didn't know this was only the beginning. If you believe that some encounters are written by fate, follow Natalie and Lorenzo's journey. Perhaps, in this cold city, love is the first bullet that pierces their hearts. Like follow and share so you don't miss part 2, the blood debt. The next morning, Manhattan acted as if no storm had ever fallen. The skyscrapers gleamed in metallic light, crowds surged along the sidewalks, and Natalie, dressed in her worn sweater, stepping into her next shift, tried to convince herself it had all been an illusion. That man, those eyes, that name, Lorenzo Whitmore, surely they were just a dream tangled with exhaustion. But as she passed the reception desk of the Whitmore Tower where she worked, the security guard looked up and smiled strangely. Ms. Brooks, Mr. Whitmore said you no longer need to clean the 60th floor. She froze. Why? He said, you've been working too hard. You should spend more time taking care of your family. Her hand tightened around the mop handle. A chill crept up her spine. Family. How did he know about Megan? Her small apartment in the Lower East Side was filled with the dull golden light of afternoon. Megan sat on the sofa, coughing violently, trying to hide the empty pill bottle in her hand. You worked overtime again, didn't you? The girl asked weakly. Natalie forced a smile, pressing her lips together to hide her worry. Yes, but I'll manage. Just a few more weeks and we'll be fine. The window rattled in the wind. A shadow appeared at the doorway. Lorenzo. He stood there in the same black suit he'd worn that rainy night, only now his shoes were stained with faint watermarks, and his smile looked tired. Your door wasn't locked, he said quietly, his gaze sweeping across the worn-out room. And Megan. He nodded toward the girl. Has she taken the new medicine yet? The question stopped Natalie cold. You've been following me. Lorenzo didn't answer. He stepped inside, eyes lingering on the cracked ceiling, the water-stained walls, the frayed armchair. I don't follow, he said softly. I just remember what it felt like to live in places like this. He set a paper bag on the table. Inside are Megan's prescriptions, enough for a month, and some cash. I know you wouldn't accept it if I called it help, so consider it. Repayment for the debt I owe you. Natalie wanted to protest, to throw the bag away, but his calm, steady tone dissolved every argument before it formed. You once saved me, Natalie, by keeping silent when you should have called the police, by hiding a hunted man in your basement for 3 days. He paused, his eyes locking on hers, warm, unwavering. Now it's my turn to save your life. That evening, Natalie sat by the window, watching a new drizzle fall over the city. She hadn't touched the money, nor opened the bag of pills. His words echoed in her mind. Now it's my turn to save your life. Part of her wanted to believe him. The other part was terrified. Who was he in this world? A man who had died and returned, carrying the shadows of the Mafia. Did he come to save her, or to claim something far deeper than a debt? The next morning, at the public hospital where she went to refill Megan's prescription, the doctor pulled her aside. "Ms. Brooks," he said gently, "a large sum has been transferred to the patient fund under Megan Brooks's name. The hospital needs your consent to proceed with extended treatment." A large sum, she repeated, her voice trembling. Nearly $50,000. Her purse slipped from her hand. There was only one person who could have done that. That afternoon, she went to the Whitmore Tower, the 60th floor, the most secure in the building. The guards nodded and let her through, as if they had been instructed. The office door opened to the scent of leather and sandalwood. Lorenzo stood beside a massive window, the city sprawling beneath him like a chessboard. He didn't turn around. "I knew you'd come," he said. Natalie stepped forward, her voice shaking but clear. "Why did you pay for my sister's treatment?" "I don't need your pity." He turned slowly, his eyes glinting with steel. "Pity? No. I don't pity the one who once saved my life. I only invest in what I want to keep. I'm not a possession. I never said you were." His tone softened. "I just don't want to see you disappear again." Silence thickened between them. Outside, the sky deepened into violet. The city blazed with light. But inside that office, only breath and old memories remained. Natalie looked at him and said quietly, "You vanished for 10 years. No word, no trace. Do you think you can just come back and I'll believe you?" He stepped closer until the distance between them was only a heartbeat. "I don't need you to believe me right away," he murmured. "I just need time." She let out a faint, bitter laugh. "Time is something I don't have much of. Lorenzo, my sister needs to live. And I need to hold on to myself." He was silent for a moment, then pulled a thin folder from his desk and slid it toward her. "Then hold on to yourself this way." She glanced down. It was a new employment contract, not as a janitor, but as temporary administrative assistant to Director Whitmore. Salary $10,000 a month. Natalie looked up. "This is a joke. Right, no?" He leaned back against the desk, voice quiet as air. "I need someone I can trust. You need a way out. I'm giving you both. And the condition. Only one." He looked straight into her eyes. "Don't lie to me." She scoffed. "I have nothing to lie about." "You'd be surprised." "Natalie." People lie the most when they're afraid of what they really feel. His gaze made her chest tighten. Her pulse raced. The air thickened. Since when had his presence made breathing feel so heavy? A week later, Natalie officially stepped into the 60th floor office. She wore a white blouse, black slacks, hair neatly tied looking like someone entirely new. She didn't realize every pair of eyes in the building followed her, not because she was beautiful, but because she was the only one allowed through that door without inspection. Lorenzo spoke little. His orders were brief, his tone calm, his stare unreadable. But every time she accidentally met his gaze, something inside her trembled like a hidden current humming beneath still water. One evening, as she was about to leave, he stopped her. "Do you know who's been watching you outside?" She froze. "Watching me." He placed a printed photo on the desk, 2 men standing across from her apartment. Victor. And his men. "They haven't given up. You said I erased your debt. But for men like Victor, blood is the only real currency." His voice was slow, measured, like a verdict. "You can't go back to that apartment. You have no right to decide that." "No," he said, standing up and walking toward her, his breath brushing her hair. "But I have the right to protect the person who once saved me. Don't you understand that?" She opened her mouth, but his eyes silenced every word. There was something in them, not just power, but fear. A fear so deep it had to be caged inside the cold mask of the man who ruled half this city. "You'll stay at my place," he said quietly but firmly. "Until it's safe." "I can't." "You can. And you will. Because I won't lose you again." The last words didn't sound like an order. They sounded like a confession, one wrapped in the armor of a kingpin. Natalie looked at him and saw not just power or darkness, but cracks, the fractures of a man who'd once been betrayed by the world. She didn't know whether to hate him or pity him. All she knew was that, from that moment on, she had crossed a line she could never return from. That night, when the car stopped before Lorenzo's mansion on the outskirts of Manhattan, she looked through the window and saw the towering iron gates, the warm lights glowing like a fortress in the rain. She whispered to herself, almost too softly to hear, maybe the real debt isn't about money. Lorenzo opened the door and said only one thing, Natalie, the real debt is written in the heart. And the door closed behind them, swallowing them both into the sound of rain beginning again. The wind from the Hudson River swept through the white curtains, making the golden light inside Lorenzo's mansion tremble like a fragile breath. Natalie stood at the foot of the staircase, her shoes still muddy, clutching her small handbag as if it were a talisman. She wasn't used to this kind of silence, luxurious, cold, and full of hidden meaning. Down the long hallway, every oil painting shared one thing in common. The men in each portrait all looked in the same direction toward the walnut desk where Lorenzo sat. He looked up when he heard her steps. You don't need to be afraid. No one in this house can touch you without my permission. From anyone else, that might have sounded like a threat. But from Lorenzo, it sounded like a vow. Natalie replied, her voice hoarse with fatigue and restraint. I'm not afraid. It's just, all of this feels unreal. This house isn't mine. And the man sitting there, I'm not sure I ever really knew him. He leaned back in his chair, the lamplight falling across his face, half in shadow, half in light. Maybe you never knew the man I've become, he said softly, but you once knew the boy I used to be. That night, dinner passed in silence. Lorenzo sat across from her, his shirt unbuttoned at the collar, sleeves rolled up, revealing a faded scar running along his wrist. Natalie noticed it and suddenly remembered the faint image of a 16-year-old boy hiding in an old basement, his face pale from blood loss, yet smiling when she offered him a piece of cookie. What's your name, she had asked. Lorenzo, the boy answered, his eyes burning bright. One day, I'll come back and no one will ever make you cry again. She had long forgotten that promise, but it seemed he never had. After dinner, Lorenzo took her for a walk in the garden behind the mansion. The night air smelled of lavender and wet grass. I bought this place last year, he said in his deep, even tone. It used to belong to a Russian family. One of them worked for Sokolov. Natalie turned to him. Sokolov. That name sounds familiar. Lorenzo stopped walking. His eyes grew distant. His voice dropped, low and heavy. He's the man who ordered my family killed. She froze, her breath catching midair. What did you say? I was 18 when it happened? He stared toward the distant city lights shimmering across the river like dying stars. A winter night. The house was surrounded. They wanted to erase the Whitmore family from the map. I survived because I escaped through the back door, took 3 bullets, and collapsed right in front of the old building where you lived. His words fell softly, like ashes, yet each one pressed heavily against her chest. You dragged me into your basement and stopped the bleeding with an old tablecloth. You're the reason I'm alive. He turned to her, his eyes no longer cold but filled with a weary sorrow. And the reason I disappeared for 10 years was because I had to learn how to survive in the world that killed my family. Natalie didn't know how much of his story to believe, but the stillness in his gaze, so honest it couldn't be faked, dissolved every doubt. And what are you now? She whispered. The man both Sokolov and the government want erased. A faint smirk tugged at his lips, sharp as a blade. The one who commands what others don't dare to speak of, and who would burn the whole city to the ground if anyone touched the woman he loves. Her heart tightened. The woman you love? She asked softly. He didn't answer. He only looked at her as if, in that moment, the world had narrowed to just the two of them, one consumed by vengeance, the other the spark that unknowingly reignited his fire. In the following days, Natalie began to realize the mansion wasn't as peaceful as it appeared. Every night, black cars parked outside the gate. Men in suits spoke in a language she didn't understand. Sometimes, when she passed the hall, she caught fragments of words: shipment, cleanup, bloodline. When she asked Lorenzo, he only said, business. Things you shouldn't know. You want me to stay here but keep me blind to everything. You think that's protecting me, she snapped one night, voice trembling between anger and fear. He was silent. After a long pause, he said quietly, "Yes, because the more you know, the less way back you'll have." She turned away, yet deep inside, something conflicted stirred the urge to run from him, and the inability to pull her thoughts away. One night, Natalie woke to faint noises outside. She stepped into the hall and saw flickering light from the study. The door was ajar. Lorenzo was on the phone, speaking Italian, his tone low, harsh. There was blood on his arm, not his own. From the shadows, she heard him say one final sentence clear, heavy, metallic. "No one mentions her name. Anyone who does, I'll kill them myself." She stepped back, heart pounding wildly, and in her mind, one question echoed. Was he protecting me, or hiding me from something far worse? The next morning, he appeared in the kitchen, calm, too calm. "Did you sleep well?" he asked. She didn't answer. Her eyes flicked to the faint trace of blood still on his wrist. "Who did you kill last night?" she asked bluntly. The air froze. He set down his coffee cup, gaze steady, unblinking. "The one who tried to kill you. You can't keep taking lives because of me, and I can't let anyone take yours," he snapped, his voice booming for the first time, echoing across the marble kitchen. "Don't you understand? Natalie, you're the only weakness I have left. If they find out, you'll be dead before I can even breathe." She stepped back, shaken. "You talk as if I'm just part of your strategy." "No." He stepped closer, his tone softening. "You're the only memory that still makes me human." That afternoon, Natalie went out to the garden where the maple tree blazed red in autumn. On the stone bench, she opened the small bag Lorenzo had given her the first day. Inside, besides the keys and documents, was an old photograph. 2 children, a smiling blonde girl and a boy with a blood-streaked face, his eyes burning in the dark. She recognized herself. And him. The photo was taken 10 years ago, in the old neighborhood. But who took it, and why did Lorenzo have it? A strange chill passed through her. Something in his 10-year story didn't add up. That night, before bed, she looked out through the wide glass window. The moonlight spilled down, illuminating his figure in the garden, one hand holding a cigarette, the other in his pocket. He looked hauntingly alone. The silver glow revealed the scar on his chin old, but beneath it, she saw a fresh streak of red, blood. And in that moment, Natalie understood. The man who swore to protect her might be the very one pulling her into the greatest storm of her life. She turned away, but her heart still raced. Part of her wanted to run, to vanish into the night, but another part, one she couldn't explain, wanted to stay to uncover the truth about this man, and about the feelings that made her tremble, not from fear, but from love. The first winter rain fell over Manhattan like a warning. From the second-floor window, Natalie gazed out at the garden shrouded in mist, where men in black suits patrolled like shadows. Every morning was the same, silent, precise, and cold. Lorenzo called it safety. She called it captivity. A week had passed since the night he confessed everything. Every word he'd said was etched in her mind like an unerasable scar. "You're the only memory that still makes me human." And yet, the closer she got to him, the further away he seemed, as if he lived in 2 worlds, one for her, and another where the darkness never slept. That afternoon, as Natalie went down to the kitchen, she caught sight of Franco Lorenzo's right-hand man whispering into his phone. His voice was low, urgent, and carried a name that froze her in place, Soalov. Her breath caught. Her pulse pounded so hard she could hear it. Franco was talking to Lorenzo's enemy. Why? Before she could think further, he turned. His gray, metallic eyes locked onto hers. "Ms. Brooks," he said with a faint smile. "Lost your way." She stammered. "Just getting some water." He smirked. "You should be careful. There are doors in this house you shouldn't open." The tone was calm, but it chilled her to the bone. She backed away and returned to her room. One thought echoing in her mind: Franco isn't loyal, and Lorenzo doesn't know. That night, Lorenzo came home late. His coat was soaked with rain, his wrist smeared with dried blood. He shrugged off his jacket and looked at her weary, but his eyes softened when they found hers. Did I scare you? He asked quietly. No, she said, but you worry me. He was silent for a moment, then reached out, brushing her cheek with his fingers. Don't worry about me. Natalie, I was born to face the dark. She met his eyes, her voice barely a whisper. And if that darkness swallows you, Lorenzo lowered his gaze, a faint, pained smile tugging at his lips. Then at least it won't touch you. That night, sleep wouldn't come. Rain tapped against the windows like the city's restless heart. She stepped onto the balcony and looked toward the reflection of lights shimmering on the Hudson, and froze. Lorenzo was in the garden, speaking to someone on the phone. Franco. The two men stood face to face. For a brief second, Franco bowed not like a loyal subordinate, but like a man hiding a knife behind his back. A flash of lightning illuminated something metallic in Franco's hand. A gun. Her heart stopped. Lorenzo, she screamed. The wind tore her voice away, but Lorenzo turned just in time. Franco raised the gun, but he never got the shot off. Lorenzo spun, drew the pistol from his hip, and fired once. Franco collapsed, golden light spilling across the spreading pool of blood. Natalie stood frozen, trembling, backing toward the door. Lorenzo looked up at her, his eyes cold, fierce, but filled with something else, fear. Fear of her seeing what he truly was. You killed him, she whispered as he stepped inside, shirt soaked with rain, blood streaking his wrist. I stopped a man who tried to kill me, he said calmly. Call it self-defense. No, Lorenzo, you're becoming the very thing you despise. His gaze darkened. You don't understand. He betrayed me. He sold my information to Sokolov. If I hadn't acted first, you'd be dead by tomorrow night. Her hands clenched. I don't need anyone killing for me. But you do need to stay alive, he said softly, voice breaking with exhaustion. I can't lose you again. Natalie, once was enough to drive me insane. She fell silent. Thunder rolled outside. Lightning flashed for a moment. His face was lit up, terrifying and heartbreakingly beautiful. The kind of beauty that made you want to believe him, even if it killed you. The next day, the police came. Of course, they didn't ask many questions. Lorenzo Whitmore was not a man anyone in this city dared to cross. Franco's death was labeled an internal accident, and the file was sealed before Natalie could even process what had happened. She sat by the window, watching the case file being carried away, an emptiness spreading through her chest. She realized that in Lorenzo's world, the line between justice and sin was so thin it could vanish with a single breath. And whether she liked it or not, she was already standing on that line. That evening, he came to her. Natalie, he said softly, finding her in the library. The room was dim, the only sound the whisper of wind slipping through the cracks. Will you tell me the truth, she asked, her voice weary. How much more are you hiding from me? He was silent for a long moment, then moved closer, sitting across from her, his eyes unflinching. Raw. A lot, he admitted. Because I don't want you to be afraid. Because if you knew everything, you'd leave. She met his gaze, her eyes glimmering under the lamplight. And where do you think I could go now? He closed his eyes for a beat, then opened them. Softer this time. Nowhere. Because you're all I have left. And that's exactly what makes me weak. He took her hand and placed it against his chest. Do you hear it? Every time I look at you, my heart pounds like it's trying to escape. I've lived too long in silence, and you're the only noise I can't bear to lose. Natalie said nothing. There was something in his voice so real that every word of blame melted away. But deep down, she shivered because this love smelled like blood. That night, Lorenzo led her down to the basement. I want you to see, he said, pushing open the heavy steel door. Inside was a large room with high ceilings, lit by dim yellow light. Maps covered the walls, hundreds of names, dozens of photographs. And in the center, one circled in red Nikolai Sokolov. This is the man I've hunted for 10 years, Lorenzo said, his voice dark and low. He killed my parents. He forced me to disappear from this country. And now, he's back. Natalie stood still. And Franco, the link between us. He sent your location to Sokolov. If I hadn't stopped him, you'd be a hostage by now. She turned away, her stomach tightening. You talk about killing as if it's normal. Lorenzo stepped closer, his breath brushing her shoulder. No, Natalie. Killing is never easy, but losing you, that's impossible. She faced him, tears streaming down her cheeks. You can't use love as an excuse for every drop of blood. He smiled faintly, sorrowfully, leaning close to whisper, Then teach me. Teach me how to love without killing. Her heart trembled. She no longer knew if she was terrified or in love. When she left the basement, the rain had returned. On the table, a photo of Franco lay torn in half. Lorenzo stood alone, staring at the map on the wall at one word scrawled beneath Camden Warehouse. Fresh ink glistened below it. Trap. She must not know. Outside, Natalie closed her door, pressing her back against the wall, her heartbeat racing. She knew Lorenzo was hiding something not because he thought she was weak, but because he feared losing the one thing that kept him human. And she didn't know that tomorrow night. At the Camden Warehouse, the past would rise again in blood. Rain poured down over Manhattan like a white curtain as the black Bentley turned onto the cobblestone road leading to the Whitmore estate. Natalie sat in the back seat, her hands clenched tightly on her lap until her knuckles turned pale. She didn't ask where Lorenzo was taking her. She had learned that in his world. Questions could be double-edged blades. The tall iron gates opened with a low groan, the sound of the engine echoing across the vast grounds. The mansion loomed through the mist, standing solitary by the Hudson River like a fortress. Tall windows draped in white curtains glowed faintly with golden light, like watchful eyes keeping vigil through the night. Lorenzo stepped out of the car and glanced at her. This is the safest place I can bring you. And the place I can't leave, she whispered. He smiled faintly, a knowing smile that offered no denial, only quiet truth. Some places are only safe when no one tries to escape them. Inside gate, the mansion was disarmingly warm. Firelight flickered across walnut-paneled walls, dancing over an antique clock striking 10. Lorenzo hung up her coat himself, his movements so gentle they didn't belong to the infamous crime lord the newspapers loved to vilify. You can stay in the room upstairs, the one overlooking the river. If you need anything, ask Sophia, my housekeeper. Thank you, Natalie murmured, unsure whether she was grateful for shelter or the gilded cage it came with. He looked at her for a moment, as if about to say something more, but simply nodded. I have to meet my men. Don't worry, the guards will be around. No one gets near this house without me knowing. When he left, the warmth seemed to fade with him. Natalie sat quietly on the sofa, listening to the rain blend with the ticking of the clock. In that stillness, she realized what unsettled her most wasn't the enemies outside, but the emotions taking root inside her. The next morning, sunlight poured softly into her room. Outside the window, the Hudson drifted by in silver calm, a picture too peaceful to be real. On the desk was a breakfast tray, fresh pastries, berries, and a steaming cup of coffee. Beside it, a handwritten note. I have to go to Boston. We'll be back before nightfall. Don't leave the house. L. His handwriting was sharp, decisive like the man himself. She brushed her fingertips over the ink and smiled faintly. Even his care came with the scent of control. She walked into the back garden, down the mist-slick stone path. Everything was immaculate, the trimmed roses, the marble fountain, the tiny security cameras hidden in every corner. A paradise. If one forgot it had guards. When she returned, Sophia, the housekeeper, was tidying the living room. The master cares deeply for you, she said gently. I've never seen him bring anyone here before. He treats me kindly, but sometimes kindness can be frightening. Natalie smiled softly, her gaze distant. Sophia only returned a quiet smile, one that carried a trace of pity. By dusk, Lorenzo returned just as he'd promised, but his face was darker, his eyes shadowed by something heavy. Something happened, she asked. He didn't answer. He removed his watch, poured a glass of whiskey, and downed it in one motion. Someone breached our security system. The glass hit the table with a sharp crack. They were looking for information about you. Me, she blinked. I'm just an ordinary person. Why would anyone care? Because you're not ordinary to me. His voice was rough, low, and that makes you their target. Natalie stepped back, her confusion growing. What are you going to do? move you somewhere else, or... He paused, a dangerous glint lighting his eyes. Or make sure they never get the chance to come near. You're not going to kill again. Are you? Lorenzo's jaw tightened. He shook his head slowly. Not this time. But if they touch you, you can't live your whole life through vengeance. Lorenzo, she said softly, stepping closer. The world isn't all darkness. You know that. He looked at her long and steady and murmured, I know, but I've lived in it long enough to know that if I ever find a trace of light, I'll protect it at all costs. His eyes lingered on her then, deep enough to make her turn away. She didn't know what to call the feeling rising inside her, a mixture of being protected, trapped, terrified, and drawn to him all at once. That night, Lorenzo was nowhere to be found. Natalie wandered downstairs and saw light spilling from the library. He sat at the desk, shirt unbuttoned, a bandage wrapped around his wrist. You're hurt, she gasped, hurrying to him. It's nothing, just an old wound. She gently unwrapped the bandage and saw fresh blood seeping through. You're lying. This isn't old. Lorenzo met her gaze, the fight in his eyes dimming. I didn't want to worry you. You can't decide which parts of the truth I get to know, she said, her voice trembling. You want me here, but you shut me out of your life. How long do you think I can live behind these walls before I go insane? He rose, stepping close, his hand gripping her chin, but his eyes softened. I hide things because I'm afraid you'll leave. I don't know how to love gently. I only know how to protect completely. And if that love destroys us both? He gave a broken smile. Then at least I'll die by the hands of the only person I trust. She stood there, her heart racing wildly, and in that moment, she realized it wasn't Lorenzo she feared. It was how deeply she was beginning to understand him. The next morning, sunlight returned after days of rain. Natalie walked to the riverbank, the air smelling faintly of grass and water, as soft as a whisper. She sat down, watching the river flow endlessly, thinking, even rivers can't hold their shape forever. How can a person hold on to another's heart? Behind her, Lorenzo approached, hands in his pockets, his eyes gentle under the morning light. Do you like it here? It's beautiful, she said. But it's not mine. No, he replied quietly. It's ours. Then, almost hesitantly, he took a small key from his pocket and placed it in her hand. If you ever want to leave, use this. The right side back door. No one will stop you. Natalie looked up at him, stunned. You trust me that much? No. His smile was faint, but genuine. I just believe that if you go, you'll come back. Because between us, debts were never about money. They're written in blood, in memory, and in the hardest thing to repay. Love. She looked down at the key glinting in her palm, the light reflecting like a drop of water. And in that moment, she understood even if there was a door out. Her heart had already chosen to stay. Night draped the mansion by the Hudson in a thick velvet of darkness. Rain tapped against the glass windows, blending with the December chill, as if the world itself had stopped breathing. Natalie stood before the mirror, her hair falling loose over her shoulders, her reflection caught between weariness and confusion. In that glass, she no longer recognized herself, the woman who once only dreamed of peace, now trapped in a world where every glance could kill. Outside, the sound of Lorenzo's footsteps echoed faintly slow, deliberate. He had just returned from another secret meeting with his men, always the same smell of smoke, whiskey, and a silence heavy enough to crush. The door opened. He entered, coat damp from the rain, eyes darker than usual. You're still awake. His voice was low and rough, enough to make her chest tighten. She turned to face him, looking at him for a long moment. I can't sleep, she said quietly. Not when I keep thinking about what you're hiding. Lorenzo stopped mid-room, his gaze deep as a pit. I hide many things, Natalie, not because I want to lie, but because I don't want you to be afraid. But that's exactly what makes me afraid, she replied, her voice trembling. You say you're protecting me, but sometimes it feels like I'm trapped in a war I never chose. He stood still, the warm lamplight carving shadows across his face, sharp, cold, and scarred not just on the surface. You think I want this? He took a step closer, his voice low, like wind sweeping over the river. I wish I were an ordinary man that I could hold your hand and walk the streets without fearing a bullet in my back. But I wasn't given that choice. I was born into war. Natalie? No. Her voice was soft but steady, her eyes glistening. You were born to love. Lorenzo, you just forgot how. He froze, then suddenly reached out, grasping her wrist. His hold wasn't painful, but it made her meet his gaze. Then teach me, he said, his voice rough, almost breaking. Teach me how to love without making the person I love cry. Their breaths tangled. The air grew thick between them. In his eyes, she no longer saw the feared mafia boss, but the boy he once was, sitting in the dark, trembling as he whispered, "Thank you for saving me." "Lorenzo," she began softly, but he pulled her into his arms. The embrace wasn't forceful, it was desperate. "I tried to stay away," he murmured against her ear, "but every time I hear your name, I can't breathe. Every time I imagine losing you, I die a little more." Natalie didn't know when the tears began. She hated how he made her weak, yet couldn't hate him at all. "You don't understand," she whispered. "Love can't be a vow written in blood. It needs to be free." "I don't know how to love freely," he replied, a sad smile flickering. "I only know how to hold on to what I'm afraid to lose." She pushed him gently away. He didn't resist. In the dim light, their eyes met everything between them, fragile, raw, and wordless. Wind rose, tearing through the curtains. Natalie stepped out onto the balcony, leaning against the railing, her gaze fixed on the churning Hudson. Lorenzo followed, stopping behind her. "Do you ever think about leaving?" he asked quietly. "Yes," she said simply. "Every day." He nodded slightly, as though he'd expected that answer. "And why are you still here?" She turned to face him, her eyes steady. "Because I still don't understand you. And maybe a part of me still believes the man who once promised I'd never cry is still in there somewhere." He didn't respond, didn't deny it, didn't confirm it. In the nightlight, his face softened, no longer the cold ruler of a criminal empire, but a man standing on the edge between love and his own darkness. "I once promised my parents," he said quietly, "that I'd rebuild the Whitmore Empire clean, legal. But I learned something: there's no such thing as clean in this world. To survive, I had to become the very thing I hated." He looked at her. "You're the only thing that reminds me I'm still human." Natalie stepped closer, resting her hand gently over his heart. "And if one day I'm gone, what then?" His lips tightened, but he didn't answer. Yet his eyes said everything. He would never let that happen. The night stretched endlessly. They sat before the fireplace, saying nothing. The crackle of flames threw shifting light across an old photograph on the mantel, the Whitmore family portrait. In one corner, a young boy smiled brightly. Natalie stared at it. "That's your mother." He nodded, his eyes darkening. "She was the only one who ever believed I could be good. Before she died, she told me, 'One day, you'll meet someone who makes you stop.'" He exhaled deeply. "I think that someone is you." Her heart ached. She didn't want to believe it, but his words stripped her defenses away. "Lorenzo," she whispered, "you don't need someone to make you stop. You need to want to stop." He smiled faintly, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Maybe, but if you're the reason I want to, that's enough." In that moment, all reason dissolved. She let him pull her close. His kiss came slowly, carefully, as if he were afraid of breaking something fragile between them. Their breaths merged, and outside, the storm calmed. For a heartbeat, the world was only them, a man learning how to love, and a woman learning how to trust. At dawn, soft golden light filtered through the curtains, falling over two figures asleep on the sofa. Natalie stirred first. Lorenzo still slept, his face unguarded, peaceful in a way she'd never seen. She looked at him, her heart caught in something between tenderness and fear, the desire to hold on, and the urge to run. A faint glint on his wrist caught her eye, a silver chain. She touched it lightly and realized it wasn't jewelry, but a small locket. Inside, engraved words read N and L, Brooklyn, 2015. She drew her hand back. He's kept it all these years. Outside. The Hudson kept flowing, sunlight scattering across its surface like countless fragments of memory left untouched. Natalie rose, wrapped herself in a thin robe, and stepped out onto the balcony, breathing deeply. She closed her eyes. One question rang in her mind, clearer than ever. Can love redeem a man who's lost his soul, or will it drag them both deeper into the dark? Behind her, Lorenzo opened his eyes. He didn't call out, just watched her silently, as if afraid that one sound might make her vanish with the morning light. And when she finally turned, their eyes met no words needed. Because sometimes, the truest confession isn't "I love you," but "I'm still here even when everything in me is broken." A week after that stormy night, Lorenzo was himself again, cold, controlled, and distant. The secret meetings, the midnight calls, the unannounced departures, all of it turned the mansion by the Hudson into an echoing shell. Only Natalie remained, along with an unspoken dread that grew heavier by the day. She didn't ask questions anymore. She knew he wouldn't answer. But deep inside, her instincts screamed something was coming, a storm that Lorenzo was trying, and failing, to hide her from. That morning, when Natalie came downstairs, Sophia the housekeeper was folding an unfamiliar outfit. "The master asked me to prepare this for you," she said. "You'll be accompanying him tonight." "Where, Las Vegas?" Natalie froze. "Las Vegas." "Why would I go there? Because that's his order," Sophia replied softly. "And the only way to keep you safe." By late afternoon, Lorenzo entered her room. He looked tired but resolute. "I need you on this trip. I'm not part of your business. This time, you are." He met her eyes unflinching. "Sokolov will be at an underground summit in Vegas. I need someone he won't suspect. That person is you." She shook her head, her voice trembling. "You're insane. You want me to be bait." "No," he said quietly. "I want you to be the knife." On the private jet to Las Vegas, silence wrapped around them like a second skin. The city lights stretched beneath the plane's wings, a glittering sea of gold. Natalie stared out the window, her voice barely above a whisper. "I used to think all I wanted was peace. Now, even breathing feels dangerous." Lorenzo turned slightly, his tone low and grave. "I used to think I'd die before I ever found you again. So if I have to face death once more, at least this time, I want you beside me." She looked at him for a long moment. "You call that love, Lorenzo? To me, it feels like a sentence." He smiled faintly, a smile that carried more pain than arrogance. "Maybe, but sometimes love is the only sentence worth serving." That night, Las Vegas gleamed dazzling and deceitful. They entered the Grand Miragio Hotel, where the underworld elite gathered under chandeliers and champagne. Lorenzo's arm rested around her waist, his smile faint, his grip at her hip firm, a warning more than a touch. "You just have to play the role of my lover," he murmured, lips close to her ear. "Don't leave my side, no matter what happens. And if he recognizes me, then I'll do what I always do best." "Kill him," she whispered. "No," he breathed. "Kill anyone who sees you afraid." The ballroom sparkled with crystal light. Men in tuxedos, women in glittering gowns. Natalie caught the scent of expensive perfume and danger, the smell of blood behind civility. In the corner stood a silver-haired man with eyes sharp as frost Sokolov. When his gaze met Lorenzo's, a thin smile curved his lips. "Lorenzo Whitmore," he rasped, voice like smoke. "I thought you were dead." "Death's a bad habit I haven't kicked," Lorenzo replied, raising his glass. "And this lovely woman." Sokolov's gaze flicked to Natalie, lingering just a little too long. "She's mine," Lorenzo said slowly with finality. Natalie forced a smile, pretending calm while her pulse hammered in her chest. She could feel Sokolov's eyes slice across her like ice, dissecting, memorizing. An hour later, as the secret auction began, Lorenzo was summoned to meet a group of investors. "Stay here," he said, squeezing her hand for a fleeting second. "You'll come back always." She watched him disappear down the corridor, unease rising like a tide in her chest. 10 minutes later, a waiter approached her with a drink. "Mr. Whitmore sent this, miss." She nodded politely, but as she lifted the glass, something instinct, maybe fear, made her stop. The scent was off. Without a word, She tipped a few drops onto a white napkin. The fabric turned blue-black instantly. Poison. She pushed back her chair, but two men closed in. One spoke quietly. Almost politely, Mr. Sokolov would like a word. They escorted her into a private room behind the ballroom. Sokolov sat waiting, a glass of whiskey in hand, his smile sharp as a blade. "You have beautiful eyes," he said, voice dripping with menace. Just like the woman who once hid Lorenzo in that little house in Brooklyn. Her heart stopped. You knew me, knew you," he sneered. "I ordered the fire that burned that house down." He poured another drink, chuckling darkly. "And now your precious mafia prince will die the same way his father did." The door slammed open. Gunfire shattered the air. Lorenzo stood in the doorway, eyes burning like steel. "What did you just say about my father?" It all happened in seconds. Two of Sokolov's guards fell before they could aim. Lorenzo seized Sokolov by the collar, dragging him close, his voice low and deathly calm. "Say your last words." Sokolov coughed, blood on his lips. "You're more like your father than I thought." A single gunshot cracked through the room. Silence followed. Natalie stumbled back, shaking, her mind blank. She had never seen him kill like that, not in shadows. But right before her eyes, Lorenzo turned toward her. For an instant, the fury in him faded, replaced by something softer regret. "I didn't want you to see this, but I had to see it," she whispered through tears. "To know who I've fallen in love with." He stepped closer, his hand brushing her cheek. "Then remember this," he murmured. "I chose you, not blood. But if blood is the price to keep you safe, I'll pay it." Outside, alarms blared. Red lights flashed along the corridors. Lorenzo grabbed her hand. "They know. Stay close," he shouted. Bullets tore through the walls as they ran. Natalie's breath came in ragged gasps. In the chaos of shouting and gunfire, they burst into the parking lot, where a black SUV waited. "Get in!" Lorenzo yelled, shoving her inside. Down. Glass shattered, sparks flew as bullets ripped the air. He slammed the accelerator, tires screeching as the car shot into the night. "Lorenzo," she cried. "You're hit!" Blood bloomed across his shoulder, but he only gave a weary smile, just a souvenir from Vegas. She grabbed his hand slick with blood and gunpowder. "You're going to die because of me." He turned his head slightly, voice faint but steady. "If that's the price for your life, then it's the best deal I've ever made." The SUV disappeared down the highway, Vegas lights fading behind them, a city of illusions dissolving into the desert night. Natalie held him tightly, feeling his heartbeat faint, stubborn, the rhythm of a man standing between love and death, light and oblivion. Rain hammered against the windshield, turning the world outside into streaks of silver light. The streetlights reflected off Lorenzo's pale face as Natalie pressed her hands tightly over his shoulder, blood seeping through her fingers. "You're losing too much blood. Lorenzo, we have to get you to a hospital." "No," he gasped, voice rough and broken. "Hospitals report to the police. Sokolov's men are still out there. If I'm caught, they'll find you and kill you. I don't care. You can't die here. In this car." He turned his head toward her. Even through the pain, his eyes still burned with that familiar, unyielding fire, the defiance of a man too used to suffering. "I don't die that easily." But when he tried to smile, crimson spread across his white shirt. They reached a small safe house on the outskirts of Reno, one of Lorenzo's old hideouts. Natalie helped him inside. Trembling, the single lamp flickered weakly, filling the room with the smell of rain and antiseptic. "Sit still," she ordered, her voice sharper than she meant. She rummaged through the cabinet, pulling out needles, gauze, alcohol, things she'd never imagined using to save this man's life. Lorenzo leaned back against the wall, breath ragged. "You don't have to do this." "Shut up." She knelt down, jaw tight, stitching the wound on his shoulder, her hands shaking, but precise. He watched her not as a man used to control, but as one utterly disarmed by the courage of the woman he loved. Blood trailed down her arm, but Natalie didn't stop. "You really thought I'd let you die?" she choked out. "Not when you still owe me the truth." He was silent for a long moment before exhaling softly. "Natalie, do you remember the name Whitmore Industries? Your father's company." "It was a front," he said bitterly. "They didn't just trade steel, they traded power. And Sokolov was the man behind half of it. My father died trying to shut it down. I survived to finish what he couldn't to destroy it all. Her breath caught. So this was revenge, no, he murmured. It's freedom. But for men like me, freedom only ever comes in one form: blood. Outside, the rain fell steady, each drop a slow tick of time marking the silence between them. Natalie finished stitching and bandaging him, then slumped against the wall beside him. Her eyes stung with exhaustion, but her heart was heavier still. You know, she said softly, sometimes I wish I'd never found you again. It would have been easier. Lorenzo opened his eyes, his voice low and warm, like smoke. But then you'd always wonder if the man who promised to come back ever really existed. She turned toward him, her lips trembling. That's not fair. I've never been fair, he said with a faint, aching smile. And yet, you're still here. Dawn broke pale and cold after the storm. Light seeped through the curtains, painting the room in shades of gray. Natalie woke to see Lorenzo still asleep, breathing steady, face strangely peaceful. She touched his hand, the same hand that had taken lives, yet somehow now held hers. She rose quietly and stepped outside. The Nevada desert stretched before her, endless and gold under the newborn sun. The sky was clear, but her thoughts were tangled beyond repair. Then the low growl of an approaching engine. She spun around. A black car was pulling up, one she didn't recognize. She ran back inside. Lorenzo, there's a car coming! He woke instantly, reaching under the table for his gun. Hide. Behind the curtain now. She obeyed, heart pounding. The door creaked open. A gray-haired man entered slowly, hands raised. Don't shoot, Lorenzo. It's me, Sebastian. Lorenzo lowered his weapon, exhaling. I thought you were dead in Atlantic. Sebastian smirked. You think I die that easy? I came to warn you. You've been betrayed, someone inside. Whitmore turned. The air thickened. Lorenzo's jaw clenched. Who, your finance chief? Preston. Lorenzo shot to his feet, fury sparking in his eyes. Impossible. I saved that man from Sokolov. Exactly why, Sebastian said grimly. He sold you out. All of Natalie's files, her hospital records, passport, even the photo of you two at the Hudson estate are in his hands. Natalie stepped out from hiding, voice trembling. He knows everything about me. And soon, he'll know more. Sebastian warned. Unless Lorenzo stops him first. After Sebastian left, silence filled the room again. Natalie watched Lorenzo, the calculation behind his eyes. The storm building. You're going to kill him, aren't you? I have to, he said quietly. If I don't, he'll use you as a bargaining chip against the world. Lorenzo. She moved closer, taking his blood-stained hand. If you keep doing this, one day there'll be nothing left of you but the bodies you've buried. He looked at her, and for a moment, a sad smile curved his lips. There was nothing left of me before you. You're the only thing that reminds me I'm still alive. She wanted to argue but couldn't, because deep down, she knew he wasn't making excuses. It was the raw, ugly truth of a man who'd lived too long in darkness. By afternoon, the wind had risen. Lorenzo stood, fastening his gun holster. I have to deal with this. Stay here. Lock the doors. Don't open for anyone. No. She gripped his arm tightly. I'm coming. No. Natalie. This isn't your fight. I'm tired. Lorenzo, she said quietly, eyes burning. Tired of waiting in the dark, not knowing if you'll ever come back. If you go tonight, I go too. He stared at her for a long moment, then finally nodded. All right, but if things go wrong, I'll choose you, not revenge. She gave a faint, sad smile. You're lying, because I know you'll choose both. That night, they arrived at an abandoned warehouse outside Chicago Preston's hideout. Natalie stayed in the car, her hands clenched as Lorenzo walked toward the building, every step feeling like it carried the weight of his fate. Inside, Preston was waiting, unnervingly calm. So you came. I knew it would end like this. Why? Lorenzo's voice was steady, cold. Because I'm tired, Preston said quietly. Tired of living in fear. Tired of being the loyal dog of a man who doesn't know when to stop. You betrayed me because you're tired of loyalty. No, Because you forgot why you started. Lorenzo was silent. Only the sound of rain answered. Then he raised his gun. Maybe you're right. But betrayal always has a price. A single shot, no scream, just smoke and silence. Natalie rushed in as the echo faded. Preston lay motionless on the floor. Lorenzo stood over him, eyes hollow. You didn't have to, she whispered. He turned toward her, weariness etched deep into his face. I had no choice. She took his bloodied hand in hers. Lorenzo, if you keep living like this, one day I won't recognize you anymore. He was quiet for a long moment, then pulled her close, whispering against her hair. Then hold on to me, Natalie. When I forget who I am, remind me that I once loved you. Thunder rolled outside. She held him tightly, feeling his heartbeat wild, erratic, defiant as if warring against the world itself. And deep inside, her greatest fear took form. Not that he would die, but that he would live on as someone who was no longer Lorenzo Whitmore, the man who once loved her with his heart, not with his gun. The Chicago rain poured down as if trying to wash the city's sins away. Streetlights shimmered against the soaked pavement, glowing like trails of blood that hadn't yet dried. Natalie sat on the warehouse steps, her hands still trembling. The echo of the gunshot lingered in her head, sharp, hollow, and endless. Inside, Lorenzo said nothing. He cleaned his gun in silence, every motion deliberate, almost mechanical. Each time the metal clicked, the sound sliced through the air cold. Final, like the crack of her breaking heart. You know, she whispered, voice shaking. Every time I hear a gunshot, I wonder, maybe our love was just like that, quick, clean, and leaving a wound that never heals. Lorenzo froze. The dim light cast weary shadows across his face. I never wanted you to live in this world, he said quietly. But this world never gave me a choice. She looked at him, her voice trembling with anger and grief. No, Lorenzo, you chose it every time you pulled the trigger, every time you told yourself it was to protect me. His eyes darkened, as though dragged back into old ghosts. You think I want to be this? He said softly. I remember every face, every man I've killed. I remember how they looked at me before they fell. Sometimes, when I close my eyes, I still see them standing around me, and I don't know if I'm alive or if I died a long time ago. His tone was cold, but beneath it, Natalie heard something else pain so deep it left her silent. By morning, the sky was thick and gray. Lorenzo left early, leaving behind a folded note on the wooden table. I have to finish this. Don't go outside. If I'm not back by dusk, burn the letter in the drawer. Don't open it. She read the words again and again, the warning pulsing in her mind. Don't open it. But the more she tried not to, the stronger the temptation burned. By noon, with rain tapping softly against the window, she gave in. She opened the drawer. Inside lay a black envelope sealed with a crimson wax stamp, the letter L. 2 photographs fell out. One was of her taken secretly outside the flower shop near the Hudson River. The other showed a woman eerily similar to her, except for the eyes. On the back, a single line scrawled hastily, Martha Whitmore, Natalie's mother. Her heart stopped. She stared at the name until the letters blurred. Martha Whitmore. Her mother carried his family name. The door swung open. Lorenzo stood there, coat soaked from rain. His eyes landed on the photos and froze. You opened it, he said flatly, not asking, just knowing. And how long were you going to keep it from me? Her voice shook, sharp as glass. He stepped closer, removing his gloves, setting them down carefully. I didn't want you to find out like this. So my mother was a Whitmore, she said, laughing bitterly. And you didn't tell me because what? You were afraid I'd realize we might share blood. No, he moved fast, gripping her shoulders. No, Natalie. Martha was adopted by my family, not blood. I checked years ago, long before I ever found you. I swear it. She stood motionless, her breath shallow. Half of her wanted to believe him. The other half trembled at the possibility she couldn't bear to name. Then why hide it? He exhaled slowly, voice heavy as stone. Because your mother. was the reason my family was killed. The air shattered. She worked as my father's secretary. And then, she fell in love with him. He paused, voice rough. My mother found out. That night, Sokolov's men used that affair to destroy us from within. They murdered everyone, my parents, my siblings, everyone but me. And her. No. Natalie stepped back, her face drained of color. You're saying my mother caused your family's death? She was a pawn, not the culprit, he said, his voice breaking. But I lost everything because of it. I swore I'd never trust anyone from that bloodline again, until you. Tears streamed down her face. So tell me, Lorenzo, did you love me because I was me, or because I was the last piece of your past you couldn't erase? The question hung between them like a blade thin, silent, deadly. Lorenzo turned away, shoulders heavy. I don't know, he said finally. Maybe both. Natalie laughed softly, a hollow, broken sound. How cruel. I just wanted something real. Turns out the only real thing between us is the lie. She picked up the photograph, folded it, and slipped it into her coat. I'm leaving. You can't keep me here forever. Lorenzo. He stepped closer, gripping her wrist, but his eyes weren't commanding now. They were afraid. Don't go. Not now. They're still hunting you. Stay here, at least until I end this. And if it never ends, he released her hand slowly. Then I'll end it instead of you. That afternoon, Natalie left the warehouse. She took nothing but the photo and the emptiness inside her. Rain fell again, cold as needles. She walked toward the bus station, silence echoing in her chest. From the rooftop, Lorenzo watched her disappear into the storm. He didn't call out, didn't chase her. Only when she vanished completely did he whisper, I love you, but I destroyed you with that love. Night fell. The warehouse was empty, hollow. Lorenzo sat alone, staring at the glow of his phone. A message appeared. If you want her alive, come to Pier 17. Alone. He closed his eyes. Darkness swallowed the light. Thunder rolled outside, shaking the old walls. Somewhere in the city. Natalie stopped walking, a chill crawling up her spine, as if someone had just whispered her name in the wind. Midnight. Pier 17 lay shrouded in fog. A lone figure stepped from a black car, Lorenzo, wearing a long coat, a gun at his side. Waves lapped against the docks, steady as a heartbeat counting down fate. At the center of the pier, a container door hung open. Inside Natalie, tied, gagged, eyes glistening with tears. Welcome, Lorenzo Whitmore, a familiar voice drawled from the shadows. A man stepped forward, Sebastian. You. Lorenzo froze. It was you, Sebastian smirked. You thought killing Sokolov ended the game. You removed a pawn. I was the one moving the pieces. Lorenzo drew his gun, but 3 red laser sights flashed across his chest. Let her go, he growled. Oh, I will, Sebastian said, smirking. After you kneel and sign over everything, the entire Whitmore empire. Lorenzo's gaze flicked to Natalie. Despite the exhaustion, the blood, the years, there wasn't an ounce of fear in his eyes. Fine, he said quietly, but she leaves first. Sebastian laughed, the laugh of a man who believed he'd already won. Still the same Lorenzo, always surrendering for a woman. He nodded to a guard. The man dragged Natalie forward. She lifted her head, her eyes meeting Lorenzo's, desperate, pleading. Lorenzo smiled, a soft, broken smile. I'm sorry, Natalie. And then he pulled the trigger. No one ever knew whose bullet struck first. Only that the sound of gunfire echoed through the harbor, carried away by the rain tearing the night apart. And when the smoke cleared, 2 bodies lay on the cold, wet ground, one betrayed, and one who loved too much. Fog blanketed the harbor, and a distant ship's horn echoed through the morning haze, mingling with the faint smell of gunpowder that still lingered in the air. On the cold concrete lay 2 motionless figures. The wind lifted Natalie's hair, sticking it to her pale face. Beside her, Lorenzo lay still, his shirt soaked in crimson, eyes barely open, reflecting the faint light of a rising dawn. She stirred, throat dry, her voice barely more than a breath. Lorenzo. He turned his head slightly, a weak smile ghosting his lips, proud. Even in pain. I promised. I wouldn't let anyone touch you. You're an idiot, she sobbed, cradling him, her trembling hands pressing against the wound. You're not allowed to leave me. Not while I'm still here. He lifted a hand, brushing her cheek. Promise me, whatever happens, don't go back to my world. His voice was hoarse, each word scraping like gravel. Live, Natalie, live the way I never could. Blood spread across her clothes as she held him tighter, as if letting go would turn him to smoke. I don't want this world without you. You have to, he whispered, eyes glinting faintly. Because that's the only reason I fought. If I have to go, I want to know you'll still see the sunrise, even if I never will again. Sirens echoed faintly in the distance. Police, ambulances, or perhaps more enemies. Natalie didn't know, and didn't care. She could only hear his heartbeat faint, fading. Lorenzo, don't close your eyes, please. He smiled softly. I've run too long in the dark. Natalie, maybe. I finally found the light. His last breath trembled out, a whisper between heaven and earth. You are my home. His hand slipped from her face, falling limp onto the cold ground. She bowed her head over his chest, her sobs breaking through the storm, a sound so raw even the wind seemed to still. 1 month later, Pier 17 was nothing more than an abandoned stretch of land. The newspapers called it the disappearance of Lorenzo Whitmore, crime lord vanishes without a trace. No one knew that in a small seaside house near the Italian border. A woman sat each morning by the window, staring out at the ocean. Natalie had survived, saved by Sebastian, the last betrayer turned savior. He claimed redemption required witnesses. He was arrested weeks later. She was placed under protection, given a new identity. Every day, she placed a vase of white chrysanthemums on the balcony beside a small framed photo, the one of her and Lorenzo by the Hudson River, taken during their first sunset together. She wrote in her journal, every page a letter to the man she lost. You once asked if love can redeem the dark. I think it cannot by erasing the past, but by giving us the courage to face it, no matter the cost. One afternoon, while sorting through an old suitcase Lorenzo had left behind, she found a small wooden box. Inside lay a silver chain with a tiny locket engraved N and L, Brooklyn, 2015. Her tears fell as she clutched it tightly. You never really left. Did you outside? The sunset gilded the sea in gold. The waves rose gently, rhythmic, like a heartbeat. A breeze swept through the window, fluttering a loose page on her desk, an unfinished journal entry. But the first line was clear. The day I learned to forgive the past was the day you came back to me in peace. Spring arrived. Natalie opened a small seaside flower shop, selling lavender. Locals called her the woman who smells like the sea. No one knew she had once loved a man the world feared. Sometimes, a stranger would visit tall, coat draped over his shoulders, voice deep and familiar. He always bought the same thing, a single pot of lavender, and left without saying much. She never asked his name. But every time he turned to go, her heart raced that same haunting sense of belonging. One evening, he left an envelope on the counter. Inside was a handwritten note, in the same firm, elegant hand she knew too well. I once promised no one would ever hurt you. I kept that promise. You're safe now. I'm leaving not to hide, but to learn to live, as you once told me to. When you see the first rain fall over the sea, know that somewhere, under the same sky, I'll be smiling. L. The paper trembled in her hands as the wind carried the scent of salt and lavender sharp and sweet, like a final kiss preserved in memory. That night, she walked down to the shore. The waves brushed against her feet. Rain began to fall soft, warm, the first of the season. She tilted her head back, letting the drops touch her lips and eyelashes, and smiled. I see it, Lorenzo, she whispered into the wind. You're still here. The sea shimmered under the moonlight, thousands of silver fragments dancing across the surface. And in that moment, she understood love isn't about holding on. It's about setting someone free, even if it means learning to live with a forever ache. That May, high on a mountain in southern Italy, someone placed a stone marker. Lorenzo Whitmore, 1986-2024. He lived in the shadows, but loved in the light. No one knew who carved it. But every year, on the same day, a woman came with a bouquet of lavender. She stayed for hours and always left before sunset. On her way home one evening, she looked up at a sky painted in crimson and gold. A strange breeze swept through her hair, warm, familiar. And for the first time in years, she smiled not from sorrow, but peace. Though their story ended in blood, it had begun in light, the same light Lorenzo once found in her, and she, in him. The next morning's sunrise was brighter than any before, and somewhere between the sea and sky, a voice seemed to whisper through the wind. I'm still here, Natalie, in every ray of light you see. If this story touched your heart, follow the channel and share your thoughts below. Every comment is a spark that helps future stories come alive and reach more hearts.